The cold wind from Lake Michigan cut through the marina like a blade, rattling the ropes tied to the luxury yacht as dark waves slapped against the hull. Inside the cabin, dim lights flickered across polished wood and expensive leather furniture. Jack Abbott lay half-conscious on the bed, his head pounding and his thoughts foggy. Something was terribly wrong. He remembered the drink. He remembered the dizziness. And he remembered Patty Williams standing far too close, smiling in that unsettling way she had. Jack tried to sit up, but the room spun violently. "Easy, Jackie," Patty cooed from across the room. She leaned against the wall, arms folded, watching him like a scientist observing an experiment. Jack's jaw tightened. "What did you do to me?" Patty tilted her head. "Oh, please, don't pretend you don't remember." Victor wanted a little insurance. The name hit Jack like a thunderclap. Victor Newman. Of course, Victor had been manipulating everyone in Genoa City for decades, but this crossed a line even for him. Drugging Jack, using Patty, destroying his marriage. Jack clenched his fists as the pieces slowly came together. Victor needed leverage. And Jack Abbott had always been the one man he loved to torment. Patty walked closer to the bed. "You should really thank me," she whispered. Jack glared at her. "For what?" "For keeping you company while you were out." Her smile widened in a way that made Jack's stomach turn. Before he could respond, the cabin door suddenly burst open. Diane Jenkins Abbott stood frozen in the doorway. Her face drained of color. The sight in front of her was devastating. Jack disheveled and barely conscious. Patty standing beside the bed. For a moment, the world stopped moving. Diane's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Oh, Jack." Jack looked up, panic flashing in his eyes. "Diane, wait." But she had already seen enough. Her expression shifted from shock to heartbreak. Then rage. "You betrayed me," she said. Jack shook his head desperately. "No, Diane, listen, this isn't what it looks like." Patty chuckled softly. "Oh, it looks exactly like what it is." Diane turned and stormed out of the cabin before Jack could stop her. The door slammed shut behind her. Jack stared at Patty with fury burning in his chest. "You planned this." Patty only smiled. "No, Victor planned it." Back in Genoa City, Diane drove through the night with tears blurring her vision. Her mind replayed the scene over and over again. Jack in bed. Patty beside him. The humiliation. The betrayal. Or at least what looked like betrayal. But deep down, something didn't feel right. Jack had been acting strangely lately. Distracted. Confused. Almost like he wasn't himself. Then she remembered the rumors. Victor had been seen meeting with Patty. And Victor never did anything without a reason. Diane slammed her hand against the steering wheel. "This is Victor." Meanwhile, Jack forced himself out of bed. The drug was still affecting him, but rage was stronger. "You tell Victor something for me," Jack said coldly. Patty raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" Jack stepped closer. "He just made the biggest mistake of his life." Patty laughed. "You're going to go after Victor Newman's." Jack's voice dropped into a deadly whisper. "Oh, yes." For years, Jack and Victor had been rivals. Business wars. Personal grudges. Corporate takeovers. But this time was different. Victor had attacked Jack's family. His marriage. His dignity. This wasn't business anymore. This was war. The next morning, Diane arrived at the Abbott mansions. Billy and Kyle were already waiting in the living rooms. They had heard everything. Billy leaned forward. "So let me get this straight," he said. "Victor drugs Jack, sets him up with Patty, and expects nobody to figure it out." Kyle shook his head. "That sounds exactly like Victor." Diane crossed her arms. "Jack is going to want revenge." Billy smirked slightly. "That's the Abbott way." Kyle looked concerned. "But going after Victor is dangerous." They all knew that. Victor Newman had built an empire on crushing his enemies. And Jack had been his favorite target for decades. But something had changed. Jack Abbott wasn't going to play defense anymore. Hours later, Jack returned to Genoa City. He walked into the Abbott mansion with a calm expression. Too calm. Diane looked at him carefully. Jack, we need to talk. Jack nodded slowly. Yes, we do. Billy folded his arms. Before that, tell me one thing. Jack looked at him. Did Victor do this? Jack's eyes hardened. Oh, yes. The room fell silent. Kyle muttered under his breath. That man never stops. Diane stepped closer to Jack. I'm sorry I doubted you. Jack gently took her hand. He counted on that. Victor had planned everything perfectly. He knew Diane would walk in. He knew it would look like betrayal. He knew it would hurt Jack where it mattered most. But Victor had underestimated one thing. Jack Abbott's patience had finally run out. Jack turned toward Billy and Kyle. I'm done letting Victor win. Billy raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? Jack's voice was cold and focused. I'm going to destroy him. Kyle frowned. That's easier said than done. Jack nodded slowly. I know. Victor Newman wasn't just powerful. He was nearly untouchable. But every empire had cracks. And Jack intended to find them. That night, Jack sat alone in his study. The lights were dim, the room quiet, but his mind was racing. Victor had enemies everywhere. Former partners, corporate rivals, people he had betrayed. Jack needed someone who hated Victor as much as he did. Someone ruthless, someone smart, someone who understood how Victor played the game. Jack suddenly smiled slightly. One name came to mind. Tucker McCall. Tucker had his own long history with Victor. Victor had stolen glissade from him with help from Audra Charles. And Tucker had vanished from Genoa City shortly after. Rumor had it he had been imprisoned overseas. But if Tucker was free now, Jack picked up his phone. If anyone wanted revenge on Victor Newman's, it was Tucker. And if they worked together, Victor might finally face the consequences of his actions. Across the world, in a private villa overlooking the ocean, Tucker McCall poured himself a glass of whiskey. The past year had been complicated. Prison in India had changed him. Not weakened him, sharpened him. Tucker stared at the city lights below. Victor Newman had destroyed too many lives, stolen too many victories. And Tucker had been waiting for the right moment to return. His phone suddenly buzzed on the table. He looked down at the caller ID. Jack Abbott. Tucker chuckled. Well, now that's interesting. He answered the call. Jack. Jack's voice was calm but dangerous. I need a partner. Tucker leaned back in his chair. I'm listening. Jack explained everything. The kidnapping, the drugging, Patty Williams, Diane finding him in bed, Victor's manipulation. When Jack finished, Tucker was silent for a moment. Then he laughed. That sounds exactly like Victor. Jack's voice hardened. I want him to pay. Tucker swirled his whiskey slowly. So do I. Victor had humiliated him, destroyed his business, turned allies against him. And now Jack Abbott wanted revenge too. The enemy of my enemy. Tucker smiled. Looks like we have a common problem. Jack replied immediately. Then let's solve it. A week later, Tucker McCall arrived quietly in Genoa City. No announcement, no press, just business. Jack met him at a private office late at night. The tension between them was obvious. Years of rivalry didn't disappear overnight. Jack crossed his arms. I don't trust you. Tucker smirked. That makes two of us. But both men understood something important. Victor Newman was the bigger threat. Tucker leaned forward. You want revenge, I want revenge. Jack nodded. Oh yes. Tucker tapped the table. Then we combine resources. Victor's empire was massive. Newman Enterprises. Political influence. Corporate alliances. Destroying him would require strategy. Jack had Abbott power. Tucker had international connections. Together, they might actually stand a chance. Jack studied Tucker carefully. You're serious? Tucker's expression turned cold. Victor took everything from me. Jack nodded slowly. Then we start planning. The alliance had begun. Across town, Victor Newman stood in his office overlooking Genoa City. The lights of the skyline reflected in the glass windows. He looked calm. But Victor always looked calm. Behind the calm exterior was a mind that never stopped calculating. Nick entered the office. You look pleased with yourself. Victor didn't turn around. Everything is proceeding as expected. Nick frowned. You really went too far this time. Victor finally turned. I did what was necessary. Nick shook his head. You destroyed Jack's marriage. Victor shrugged. Collateral damage. But Victor didn't realize something. This time, Jack Abbott wasn't alone. Days later, Jack and Tucker sat together reviewing financial data. Victor's empire had weaknesses. Hidden accounts, questionable deals, political favors. Tucker smiled slightly. Victor has been playing dirty for decades. Jack nodded. Then we expose him. Tucker leaned back. You know what this means, right? Jack looked at him. War. Tucker raised his glass. To war. Meanwhile, Diane began noticing something different about Jack. He was calmer, focused, almost dangerous. What are you planning? She asked one evening. Jack looked at her carefully. I'm taking Victor down. Diane's eyes widened. That could destroy everything. Jack nodded. I know, but some battles had to be fought. Victor had crossed the lines, and Jack Abbott had finally decided to fight back. Across Genoa City, Victor's enemies were quietly gathering. Tucker McCall, Jack Abbott, old grudges, new alliances. The storm was coming, and when it finally arrived, Victor Newman might discover that even he wasn't untouchable. For the first time in years, the balance of power in Genoa City was about to change, and Victor Newman was about to face the most dangerous enemies he had ever created. Jack Abbott and Tucker McCall, working together, plotting revenge, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The war had begun,